the 49ers. Now, Big 12 basketball. This is not yet. We're going to go to a comment or two about Scott Drew, but I want you to. I don't know who. I think Hambone may have put this up in the forum section of Sikkim365.com, and it might be tweaked a little bit from the weekend. But Kenpom, he's the guy that does a lot of analytics. We have others that do that, Evan Miyakawa and others, but he has the Big 12 finishing. Even though Kansas State's out to this great start. TCU with the win against Kansas and a dominant win against Kansas. He has 4 teams finishing the year based on analytics at 11-7. Kansas State, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas, Baylor, TCU 10-8, and then Oklahoma State, Oklahoma 8-10, 7-11. Maybe West Virginia now 7-11, Oklahoma 6-12, Tech at 4-14. We've never seen that before, have we? Hasn't it always been?
Well, there's always
like one or
team
two
that's
or three
got
losses.
16-2 or 15-3.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, usually it's Kansas and then everybody else. But the league has gotten tight. I mean, you know, who's a coach that if you were a random university in the Big 12 that needed to hire a basketball coach, that you wouldn't trade your guy, if you were Midland right now, that you wouldn't trade your guy for in a minute in the Big 12? There's not one. Look, you know, Leonard Hamilton's like, Leonard going to retire at Florida State sometime. They could take any of these 12 guys, and I'd be like, great, awesome. That's fantastic because there were 10 guys, and that's how good the league is. You know, when you've got Porter Moser trying to, you know, fight his way back up from the middle, Mike Boynton trying to fight his way through, Bob Huggins and Mark Adams both struggling right now.
But Huggins a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
Adams.
I mean, you know, that's how tough the league is night in and night out. And the best team in the league was Kansas, right? Texas Tech, the worst team in the league, took them down to the wire. And it wasn't that surprising. It wasn't leading SportsCenter like, oh my God, look what Texas Tech just did. Everybody kind of expected, like, well, that's the Big 12. Like, it was kind of in the middle. Like, yeah, Texas Tech almost beat Kansas, but Kansas held them off. So that's the kind of year it's going to be. So if somebody winds up, you know, 14-4 in the league, more power to them.
My God. Yeah. And again, Kansas State's lost just once. They did have the win on Saturday. What was more, well, it has to be. There's not even a question. Oklahoma State beating Iowa State was an upset technically, but that didn't shock me. But TCU beating Kansas, it wasn't that they beat Kansas. They beat them at Alman Fieldhouse, and they never let Kansas get up off the canvas. They stepped on their neck, broke it, and won going away. And Kansas tonight is here in Waco against Baylor, a big Monday game that will tip at 8 o'clock. And in fact, Scott Drew, what is the difference in Baylor? 0-3 to start the Big 12 Conference, rather a couple of losses in the last possession to TCU and Kansas State at home. They've now won games on the road in Lubbock, Morgantown, and Norman to get themselves back above 500.
What we've been doing to win games is we haven't been turning it over. For the most part, we've been taking pretty good shots, and the shot selection's been good. And then we've been rebounding it better on both ends. And then defensively, you gotta make sure that you're not giving up easy buckets. And against TCU, that was the number one thing we did. And I think we've gotten better since then.
So that's Scott Drew. Baylor on Saturday, it just seemed like they didn't have enough. And Oklahoma was, you know, again, it was a low-scoring game. And then Jalen Bridges hit a three that was critical, gave him the lead. And then Adam Flagler, with the shot clock winding down with less than 20 seconds left, buries a three, a fadeaway with 0 time left as the ball's in midair in the shot clock, and they beat Oklahoma by, what was it, I guess a couple of points.
Yeah, I would like to have been a fly on the wall in the locker room after Oklahoma's second-to-last sequence. That
you mean the 14-second possession when they had 17 seconds left?
Yeah, you've got to score twice, unless the plan was to chuck up a three and make it while somebody hits you in the arm, which Baylor was all too happy to let them pass the ball around 3 times, or maybe even 4 in that 14 seconds. So I would like to hear, like, guys, where was the urgency? Like, you know, there's no 4-point basket. Like, It's not if you step back behind the half court line, we get 4. Like you have to score twice. And so they didn't do that well at all.
Craig, they've been able to dig from 0-3 to 4-3 with 3 of those 4 losses on the road, which they have to do to make up for the losses they had against Kansas State, TCU at home.
Yeah, it's been a good little run. It's not the toughest part of the schedule for sure, but they're beating who they are supposed to beat and beating who they need to beat the last couple of weeks to make this interesting, because, as you mentioned, they were kind of dangling there after the first week and a half or so, and in a spot with a fork in the road where going 0-4 wouldn't have been deadly, but wouldn't have been far off. I mean, because there's only so much that you can expect to run through consecutively. I mean, if you'd gone into 0-4, 0-5, I mean, what were you realistically expecting to do after that? So to get to 0-3 and then to reel off 4 straight wins is a big deal. I mean, tonight, obviously, you can go one of 2 ways. You either be 500 or you can be, now comfortably above 500 by a couple of games. So be huge to get a win over Kansas really at any time. But I think for this team and the way they're playing, they might be one of the hottest teams in the country if they can get a win tonight. I mean, not that it's necessarily been sexy every time they've been out there. As you mentioned, the Oklahoma game was pretty ugly, but a win's a win. So if they can get a win tonight at home, and that's, the other part is a lot of this is on the road. So, I mean, that's impressive as well. So, yeah, if they could get a win tonight, that would be absolutely massive for this team. But regardless, just good to see them, fight back and put themselves back in a position where, they're right there, at the top half and getting some of those outcomes that they're looking for as they, kind of find their identity and find themselves. And I think Jalen Bridges is a guy that's, getting better and better and turning into, the player that I think more people thought he was going to be, right? And, there's other guys that are still evolving like a Keontae George, but, if it's not Bridges, then it's Flagler. If it's not Flagler, then it's Cryer. If it's not Cryer, then it's George. I mean, they got some good pieces, so they're coming together and, they're playing some good basketball.
It's just not always at least 3 or 4 of them, and that was the case Saturday, but they made shots when they had to. A couple of notes about Kansas and Baylor. Baylor's won the last 2 times that they've played in Waco. That had never happened in the series history because Kansas at one point led the series against Baylor 30-4, and now Kansas has won 5 of the last 9, but it was 4-30 up until recently. 34 scouts have been credentialed from 16 NBA teams will be there tonight. Also, Baylor's 4 wins over Kansas have occurred since 2018. 4 wins over Kansas since 2018, tied for the most in the conference. And Texas might be the other one. I'm not sure. Paxton and UT fans, you might know that for sure. And then also, it's a whiteout tonight at the Farrell Center. Purdue back to number 1 in the country. The Big 12 teams ranked 5th, K-State, 9th, Kansas, 10th, Texas, 11th, TCU. Should I keep going on? 12th, Iowa State, and 17th, Baylor. Those are the teams. Houston dropped to number 3 after the stunning loss at home to Temple, but they'll get right back on track. That was just one of those nights, as Kelvin Sampson said. We just had a bad night.
Well, I think it's funny, like, that people want I mean, I know you want your team to go undefeated, but I do think there's a lot of people and fans that expect certain teams to do it, and only one team's done it, in the modern era, and that was Indiana, and I'm modern era, but like
76, I think that was.
Yeah,
it was like
so
in the
like,
70s.
Yeah, the
UNLV's made a run. Duke's made a run.
How many teams were in the tournament in 1976?
It's probably 32.
Yeah, so again, since the tournament's been 64 teams, nobody's done that, right? So it's hard to do.
Well, they had lost to Alabama back earlier, and Alabama right on the cusp of being number 1. But you're right. I mean, there's a reason why no one's done it for 47 years, which is nuts, considering some of the teams that have been dominant. It's hard. In basketball now, not parity, they're still the elite at the top. Alabama is right on the edge of being number 1 in the country, but right now, Purdue, Edney, and all them, they're having a heck of a run.
Yeah, I didn't want to say, like, modern era. I don't want to, like, slander Lou Alcindor and
no, don't do that.
UCLA and John Wooden, although John Wooden and he kind of cracked the case before a lot of people did when it came to guys like that. So
yeah, he brought in the African-American player, brought the black athlete into his program. Yeah.
So
and he had what was it? Marcus Johnson eventually, and Jamal Wilkes, I think it was, and obviously the great one, the greatest maybe of all time in Lou Alcindor.
Yeah. And then, of
Kareem
course,
Abdul-Jabbar.
Wilt at Kansas before then, but
Yeah, no, he had the one year when that was a great run. Of course, Bill Russell at San Francisco won back-to-back titles. We can keep going down the history books. There's one college football note